Okay, I'm Don Wilkins, and I have been a lifelong member of Calvary Episcopal Church, Pittsburgh, and I was a member of the boy choir. Back then, when I was a boy, the main choir on Sunday was a choir of men and boys. And as a matter of fact, it was a professional choir. That is to say, the boys were paid to sing. Not paid very much, but still we were paid some small amount of money. After all, we were competing with other things that boys could do to make money, like delivering papers and so on after school. So we were paid, and we went to rehearsals often during the week and rehearsed with the men and so on, and we sang 2 services on Sunday. Now, when I was in the choir from the season 1936 to 1937, Calvary Church acquired what is now Calvary Camp. It was the Sheldon Calvary Camp, named in honor of the founder, Mr. Sheldon, whom I never met. The Sheldon Calvary Camp. And so in the summer of 1937, I remember well, was the inaugural season of the camp. The boy choir was able to go there for 2 weeks free because of money that was raised for us. And as I recall, the boys' camp was for, I think, 4 weeks or maybe 6 weeks, I can't remember. And then the girls' camp followed for 3 or 4 weeks, I think. So I was 12 years old. And at that point, we were given a list of things to take. I think campers still have a list of things that they are to take to the camp. But we slept on cots in tents. So we didn't have bunk beds, we just slept on cots in tents. And I don't think the first year that we were, I can't remember. But anyway, it was really outdoor living most of the time because we were in tents. And we were told to bring with us a wash basin. So we did, and the wash basins available at that time, which were quite common, were you know, made of metal, but they were enameled wash basins. And as it turned out, we each had a wash basin, which I don't think I'd ever used really, but you sort of put that in your luggage. And when you got there, you took it to the wash stand, and then you washed and cleaned up using the wash basin. We didn't have amenities like shower stalls and things like that didn't exist back then. And we had one big bathroom, which we all used, and it was called the Kybo, K-Y-B-O, for Keep Your Bowels Open, it was called. And it turns out that the wash basins, by the way, this was before the day of Frisbees. It turns out that they made wonderful Frisbees. We used to play out in the field. Of course, they were metal like that, and if you got hit with one of them, it could really be good. So that was our camping experience. And there was no swimming pool, of course. We swam in the lake. Some days, swimming was impossible because the lake can get very rough, especially after a summer storm. There were big waves, so that was impossible. And the lifeguards were out there. They rigged up a rope of some kind at the outer limits of the swimming area. And I remember that for swimming also, we had to have a buddy. And you had to stay close to your buddy, and every once in a while the whistle would blow, and the lifeguard would say, "Buddy up!" And you had to take your buddy's hand and raise your hands in the air to show that you were safe. And that one of you was not gasping for air, drowning in the deep, stuff like that. And we also had to go down to the lake, and there was a whole set of wooden steps that went down there. And one of the hazards of the wooden steps, and also walking in the underbrush to get to the wooden steps on the way down there, and of course we were all just wearing swimming suits, was that there were close brushes with poison ivy. And I remember that everybody got poison ivy, almost everybody did. And you would go to see the nurse, and you get it on your legs and your ankles mainly. And she would scrub your legs and ankles with a liquid soap, I remember that, and a soft brush. And then she would paint them with, it was methylate, I think it was called. It was a blue substance which was supposedly dried. And you brush them in order to open up the blisters and stuff like that so that they would run, and then you brush them with methylate. So people were walking around with these blue ankles and blue shins to ward off to cure the poison ivy. But it was a great time. I remember we had lots of fun. The main person, of course, was the director of the camp, who was the Reverend William Thomas. And when things started in 1937, he was the assistant minister at Calvary Church. And he really founded the camp. He was the director, he was the camp director, and was there all the time, and of course he was at Calvary all during the year. And I guess mainly it was Calvary Camp people, though even from the beginning, I know there were a lot of people there who were not members of Calvary Church, but who were neighborhood kids. Of course, the choir itself, at that time we had a very large, we had 40 boys in the choir. And I think everybody went to camp. I can't remember anybody who didn't. Starting with the second year, as I remember, we didn't have tents anymore, but we had cabins. And the cabins, therefore, had been built during the off-season, the preceding winter and spring. And the cabins were in an L shape, halfway on the lake side, halfway on the ravine side. And the cabins all had names because different families in the church had been approached to sponsor building a cabin. And our director, Dr. Harvey Gall, had sponsored one, he and his family. So it was called Gall Hollow. I don't know if it's still there, but Gall Hollow. And then others had names of, I think mainly Calvary families who had given the cabins. And they had bunk beds with a cot in the middle for the counselor. And that was very, very nice. And they had shutters that you could lift up. I think the shutters were the whole length of the cabin. You'd lift them, they were heavy. And you folded them up and propped them open, you see. And then when it rained, you could put the shutters down. The cabin was the outhouse, you see. But the bathroom, which is where you had the wash stands, and I think there were showers in there too. That was newly built. And then, of course, there also was on the cabin side, as opposed to the side across the bridge where there was the dining hall and the director's house and housing also for the kitchen staff over there, and the altar, and the nurses' station. She had a little hut over there too, the nurses' station. And also, by the way, on that side there were the remains of an old orchard. I don't know if it was still there, but there was, I remember some apricot trees and things of that kind, which we could see were starting to bear fruit when we were there in the summertime. So obviously it had been an orchard before it was taken over by the camp. Yeah, the guy who built the cabins was a local carpenter, contractor, and he came while we were camping and was presented to the campers as the man who had built the cottages. We got to meet him and talk to him and so on. And I remember he also built for us down at the lakefront I remember this, I don't think it was the first year, but I think starting the second, but I'm not sure. A crib, I think that's what we called it, a crib being a rectangular structure made simply of big wooden planks. I guess they were sort of like 4x8s, and they were about 8 feet long. And they were put in a square with big gaps in between them, see. And then that thing was towed out to a reasonable depth in the lake so that it would be where the water would be, I don't know, 5 or 6 feet deep or something like that. Then the idea was that it would be filled with stones. It had a wooden floor, so you had to fill it with stones to weight it down so that it would be permanently out there. And it was the lifeguard station. And it had a flat roof so that you could then climb up on it, you see, in the station, but it would be there. So in order to fill it with rocks, we formed a human chain from the shore all the way out to the thing, and we would pass rocks overhead and stuff like that, as we do to a rhythmic count. And then we would also sing songs as we did that, see, passing the rocks sometimes overhead to the next guy, so that the next guy and plop the rocks into this crib to fill it up with rock to provide that. And of course, I think it lasted 1 year, because of course, Lake Erie in the wintertime can be subject to some pretty furious storms and ice sheets, very thick ice sheets, which of course then move with the wind. And we get a sheet of ice which could be, I don't know, a couple of miles long and how many deep, and of course 3 or 4 feet thick. The weight of that is just overpowering, and of course the waves then push it to the shore, it smashes everything in its way. So that poor crib, I don't think lasted very long over the winter. But it lasted for the summer, and that's what served its purpose. Yeah, my own experience was that I was a camper in 37, 38, and 39. And then in 1940, I remember, I was a farm boy. And then I also was a farm boy for part of summer of 41, but it's at that point when I was graduating from high school and going to college, so I didn't have a full summer that summer of 41. But anyway, in the summer of 40 was my longest time because, of course, I was a farm boy through the whole boys' camp and then also the girls' camp. So I was a farm boy during the whole camp session, which was the first time that that was possible. I'm not sure, but maybe 1940 was the first year that they had farm boys. And they had built a cabin, I think 2 cabins, on the other side of the road, like the cabins that the campers slept in, and that was for the farm boys. And there was an old barn across the road, and then also a house, a very nice house. And that's where the director of the farm, was named Bob Fouts. He lived there with his wife, very, very nice guy. He was in charge of the farm boys. And so he instructed us on what to do because most of us were not country boys at all. We didn't know what to do things. So they had planted all sorts of things. He had planted them, corn, for instance, and beans, and let's see, what is this? Corn and beans, I remember primarily. And we had to go and hoe the corn. Well, I'd never hoed corn before, but he taught us how to do all those things. We got to hoe the corn. And when it came time to pick the beans, we picked the beans. I think we cultivated the beans also. We had hand cultivators that we used and hand hoeing. And that was the first farm work which I had really done. And then what really got our imagination going were the chicken coops. We had chicken coops because it was tradition on Sunday at lunchtime, the main meal at noon on Sunday, that was when the parents would come to visit. So you always had the regular campers and the counselors, and then also visiting parents who would come to visit on the weekend. And so you had the Sunday dinner, and it was chicken. So we provided the chickens. That is to say, we had to catch the chickens, and then, of course, kill the chickens and pluck them, and then dress them. So that you have to remove the innards and so on, get them ready for cooking and stuff like that. So that was really an amazing experience for us farm boys to do. It's the first time I'd ever had to deal with that sort of aspect of, well, you can't call it butchering, but still preparing animals for eating. So I'll always remember that. It was just sort of, well, chicken netting, chicken wire on top of the coops. And the cages were about, since it was about, a little taller than a person, maybe 7 feet high, as I remember. Of course, I wasn't full grown then, maybe they were 6 feet high. But some of the chickens would get out, you just sneak it under the fence or something like that. So you grab the chicken, chase it down, and grab it by the legs, and then throw it out. Of course, chickens can fly. That is to say, once they're in the air, they can soar down, see. So they circle down and soar and then hit the ground, and they always land very awkwardly. They land on their feet, and boom, they do a nosedive in there. And it hits the ground. That was a whole new thing. Farm boys wouldn't think that that was anything exceptional, but that was really fun for us to see. And other things that we would see would be that the chickens, we studied chickens because we had to feed them every day, and of course on Sunday we had to go and take them and kill them. But during the week also we could observe them. And if there was a cloud going over, so the clouds, they would all rush toward the door inside the pen because their instinct tells them that if there's a shadow, it could be a hawk. You see, so they see the shadow coming, so they all made for the door to the chicken coop to go inside. And they would all flock to the entrance or something. And some poor chicken who was the bottom of the social scale would always stand by the door. They would elbow that chicken out of the way, and that was the runt of the flock, and the others would peck it. So often the runt of the flock head would have wounds all over it because the other hens would peck at it. The barn had this antique phone still attached to the wall, and it had a hand crank. So that was from the day when, especially rural phone service, were all party lines, and in order to activate the phone, there was a hand crank. So we hand cranked the phone to generate enough signal, I guess, to signal the operator, I guess. Anyway, this phone had a hand crank, so we thought, well, since we have to chop the chicken's head off, and we'd try to electrocute the chicken. So we took wires from this hand phone and wrapped one wire on each leg of the chicken, and cranked the crank like that. It didn't faze the chicken, she just sort of pop, pop, pop like that. Oh gosh, it was fun. As I recall, there were several tennis courts, but including, I think, one good one, which was on the dining hall side of the ravine. I think the other tennis courts were on the other side, but the one there was the top court. It was a clay court, but the clay was all from the shore of Lake Erie, you see, because there was sand, of course, and then there were sort of hills and cliffs, which were, I think, mostly clay. So we would get clay from the hill and load it in the cart and haul it up with the tractor, and then put the clay on the tennis court, and then we had to wet it down and then roll it to put a new surface on the tennis court. And once we had rolled on a new clay surface, then we had to whitewash the lines on the tennis court, which we did according to the stencils and stuff. Okay. As a farm boy, we'd have a day off. Mr. Phelps would take us into Conneaut, which was not all that far away. I mean, it was a good hike, but we could have hiked into Conneaut. And we'd take us to the Conneaut Creamery, which was a big ice cream parlor where you get sodas and sundaes and stuff like that we would feast ourselves on. The Conneaut Creamery. And matter of fact, I think maybe the camp bought their milk also from the Conneaut Creamery, but I'm not sure.